After Compline, the cloister stones sweat cool. The garden is a black square with a sheen on it, hedges breathing like a slow animal. You stand under the arch by the lavatorium door with both keys on your belt and a basket tucked against your ribs. You are the newest lay brother on water and towels. You move at night when the rule wants no words. If you like slipping behind the myth to watch how water truly moves, tap subscribe and ring the bell, then walk beside me. We will keep the taps honest and the silence whole. You lift the latch with the finger so it will not clack. The lavatorium is a ring of stone basins around a pillar, each with a bronze nose that looks surprised to be useful. The conduit gives a soft throat sound somewhere in the wall. You touch the first spout with your knuckle. Cold. That is good. You set the basket down and count by touch. Ashlie jar, sand jar, 2 pumice stones wrapped in linen, the towel tokens, the small copper ladle. The towel cupboard waits against the far wall with pegged rows and short labels in the cellarer's square hand. Refectory clean, Saturday warm, infirmary. The keys bump your hip when you cross to the cistern room. The air is damp bread. The float valve looks like a wooden bird asleep on water. You lift the lamp to see the line on the wall where Full lives. It has fallen 2 fingers since noon. You chalk the drop on the slate beside the hatch. The prior will want the number. He always wants the number. You test the leather seat of the valve with your thumb. It is seated. Good. The guttering lamp coughs and makes your shadow climb the wall. You shield the flame with your palm and whisper nothing to it, because you are not allowed to whisper, and yet you do. The flame returns to its work. The water sighs when you open the stopcock a hair. You leave it to rest that way. The basins need it. On the way back, you pass the little door to the reredorer passage. Warm air noses out, not smoke, not stink, only the person heat of a building that has learned bodies. You think of the sand jar you will need to refill by dawn and of the hand sign for go first that keeps the night path polite. You learned 20 signs in a week. Soap is a fist that turns, towel is a flat hand pulling across the other arm, hot is a pinch, move is a chop with the edge of the hand. The sign for you first is a small gift with the fingers. You practice it once at the turning of the stairs. It makes you smile without noise. A guest footwork scuffs in the outer walk. Sand grates under pilgrim leather, that flat shuffle of miles and bad sleep. The porter murmurs into the dark and the guest replies with breath, then with the wrong sentence. I was told monks do not wash. The words crawl toward you. Your chest learns anger and remembers the rule. Your hands find your basket handle. The prior's sign appears out of shadow. He tips 2 fingers to say, show, not tell. You bow and step into the lavatorium to put the lie away. You set down the Ashlie jar where the first light from the slit window will find it at dawn. You lay a ring of small linen squares next to the pumice stones. You prime the first bronze nose by lifting and dropping the valve, and the spout coughs, then runs. The sound is a trickle at first and then a thin cord that keeps its promises. You warm the jar of lye at the brazier in the corner. The brazier is banked with last coals. You stir it with the ladle until the lye loosens like a shy idea. A senior monk moves into the doorway, holds his palm out, and flashes the sign for hot. A pinch. You make the face that says, wait. Then you bend, open the ash casket, pinch lye to the side of a basin, and rub with the pad of your thumb until the paste slicks. The monk nods with no curiosity in it. He has seen this 1,000 times. He has kept this place alive with that nod. The novice arrives late. He is always late. A good boy who still has a music box in him. He skids on the flag near the door and catches himself with the cupboard corner loud enough to bruise the night. He flashes the sign for towel as if he were stamping a page, and the cupboard answers with pegs that sit empty where his eye goes. You have counted wrong. Your chest does the thing other people call a flinch. You take 2 towel tokens from your basket and hang them on the pegs for refectory clean. You reach into the bottom of the cupboard and pull out the small roll the cellarer keeps for men who intend to learn. You put it into the novice's hands with the sign for cover your hair. He takes it with both palms and bows in a way he will not remember to do when he is old. He looks at the basins and makes the sign for soap. You answer with a twist of your hand and direct him to the jar. He grins. His feet say sorry on the way out. The guest stands in the doorway and cannot find a place for his mouth. He cannot speak here after Compline. He has brought the rumor with him. The rumor sits against his teeth. You show him the sand jar and take a pinch, rub it on your own palm so he can hear grit do its work. You show him the lie and the way you buff the bronze nose with a cloth so it will not carbuncle with water. You show him the towel pegs with tokens and the rules pinned small above them. Wash before refectory. Hold water, do not splash, wipe the lip of the spout. He nods as if you have invented the night for his sake, and he is proud of you for it. You make the sign for you first and step aside. The light by the cistern goes low again. It is gutter or draft. You take the bronze lid off the lamp, adjust the wick, and feed oil from the wine flask the cellarer swears he never set aside for this. The lamp steadies. You count the pegs again, left to right, and mark the towel number in the cellarer's notebook. He keeps a column called Towel Losses, and writes the small crimes of men who love linen too much. He thinks you do not know it, you do. His hand writes quickly or slowly depending on whom he is speaking to when he counts. He moves numbers like bread on a board. You write yours straight and add a dot when a towel is too thin to be anything but a memory. The mid-run tap in the south wall feels stubborn. You palpate the valve with 2 fingers, twist it open, close it, open again. Air knocks inside like a visitor late to the story. Then the water takes the path it should. It runs with a lively whisper. You touch the lead above the joint to check for weeping. It is dry. You thank nothing. Later, when you walk the conduit chamber, you will set your ear to the wall like a doctor and listen for the places where frost thinks it knows something you do not. You cross to the warming room with the second key. The door is low because the men who built it believed heat prefers small questions. Inside is the hush of the only place where the rule looks at a brazier and forgives it. The copper for Saturday sits on its frame like a permanent intent. You lift the lid, lean it against the wall, and run your finger along the rim. No dust. The copper is clean. Your job on Friday will be to carry buckets from the corner spout in the cloister to fill it. Your job tonight is to set the kindling so it remembers how to take flame. You knuckle the grate with a coin to make sure the ash will fall through tomorrow. A mouse considers your ankle and resigns the thought. The stone has heat in it from the last time the rule allowed it. You put the lid back. Do not look at it with desire. Do not think of warm water as a kindness meant for you. The infirmarian passes the door, a shadow with a tray, a bottle clinking against a bowl. She stops where the path curves and you raise your hand to make the sign for Rosemary. Her hand answers with later. In her chest, the house keeps all its stitches. In your pocket is the small slip of waxed linen she gave you yesterday with a dot of thinned vinegar on it. For cuts, for nails. She makes a small sound in her throat that counts people by memory. 7, she says, and because she is allowed to talk, you take the number as air. 7 need washing in the morning who cannot come here. You nod and point to the copper. She knows. She will send a boy to you by tierce to carry jugs to the infirmary. You hold your basket nearer your ribs as if it were a thing that can keep promises. The floor under the basins has the faint smooth of strayed sand. You sprinkle a little quicklime on a wet flag where the novice's heel wrote his joke. Lime whispers on stone. You smooth it with the side of your foot and the mask disappears. The spouts trickle in a language that is not words. Your body learns the grammar. Do not splash. Keep your sleeves above your elbows. Push a plug into the drain before pouring lye. Count to 5 when you lift the stopcock so the pressure will not sulk. Hold the towel by the corners when you hang it or the peg will mark it. You have not been here long. You already move like furniture. Footsteps return. The senior monk, the one with the hands that know the whole house, steps close and shows you a pinch again. Hot. You raise your brows in apology and turn your wrist. Wait. He breathes a patient breath. You show him the brazier, and then the small jar of embers you keep under a clay saucer. You add 2 to the bank and blow once. Heat smartens. He nods. You take a bail of water with the ladle and pour it across the ash until it decides to be alive. In the warming room, the copper would be a drum. Here it is only a medicine cup. You put the lid back on the ember jar. He takes the basin that lives under the second spout and pours water into it to test the heat. He dips his fingertips and wipes them against his jaw with the quick neatness of men who do not linger at mirrors. He sets the basin down and taps the towel token with a finger. He is the one who helped the cellarer devise the token scheme. Every towel takes a token when it leaves the cupboard, and the token comes back only when the towel does. It is the monastery's idea of a leash. It works, most days. The guest returns with clean hands and a face that looks like someone who has found a better roomer. He points at the ash lye jar. You nod. He points at the sand. You nod again. He spreads his hands because he does not know the sign for I was wrong. You draw the sign that breaks no vow and says everything. You first. He breathes out the laugh people make when they realize the story they brought to a place cannot live here. You slip along the wall to the cupboard and lift the corner of the towel shelf. There is a small slate hidden at the back under the last fold. It holds 3 marks, 3 names, 3 men who never queue for towels. You erase 2. 1 stays. There is always one. You put the slate down and hook the shelf over it again. Your stomach pulls at you like a dog at a leash. You keep your face polite. The conduit puff in the wall is steady now. You touch the stone and feel the tiny tick where the pressure comforts itself. In the conduit chamber, the float valve will be resting as it should. You want to go and listen. You want to put your ear to the plank and hear water choose obedience. You do not. You stack 4 towels on the refectory pegs and hang 2 more tokens. The pegs look like teeth when they are full. The rule likes that smile. It thinks it is neatness. Maybe it is. On the way to the cistern once more, you pass the place where the night path in the Reredorter bend is marked by a groove at hip height. Men touch it with their knuckles as they go. It has the shape of a hand over a century. You touch it. It says nothing. It does its job. Your job is the same. You check the sand jar at the corner stall. Low. You write sand on your wrist in ash so you will not forget. You wipe it off with spit and the skin is cleaner than it was a minute ago. You will never admit that you tried your own lie on your own palm the first night. You smelled like a bread oven for a day and a half. You open the small chest in the conduit chamber and remove the lead patch kit. Wax, a roll of thin strip, a dull knife, a warm cloth folded over a pot of goose fat. You do not need them tonight. You set them out anyway on the bench. You believe in rehearsal. You run your finger along the joint where the feeder pipe turns to make the wall. The seam is smooth. Frost has not bitten it yet. When it does, you will be the first to know. Because the float will chatter and the basins will lose mood. You pat the pipe like it is a mule. It hears you or it does not. You pretend it does so that your heart will slow. Back at the lavatorium, the prior stands with his back to you. He is a tall stone. He does not need to look at you to see the room. He is a man who counts with shoulders. He makes a small sign with his hand at his side. 5. It means 5 minutes before matins. It means vanish. He points one finger toward the door of the warming room. It means copper Saturday. You incline your head and put the kindling basket on the bench where the first light will make it look like a blessing. He points 2 fingers to the towel pegs. It means count again. You count. 28. He nods with his neck. His neck is a book with 100 pages you do not own yet. You hope one day to borrow it. The guest bows to the prior with that theatrical reverence people keep in their pockets for nights like this. The prior bows as if he were a hinge. The guest sees his own shape in that bow and understands something he did not bring with him. It is not your job to narrate his understanding. Your job is to gather your basket and put a small stone under the door of the cupboard so the morning light will not slam it. Your job is to lift the lye jar to the top shelf so no boy will tip it. Your job is to take the lamp to the cistern and blow it out so the air will not go stale. Your job is to leave the spouts primed and the tokens counted. When you pass the infirmary on the way back to your cell, you see through the half-open door a shelf with small bottles lined like modest saints. The sweet sharp of rosemary finds you. Vinegar sits in a glass like a star caught in water. The infirmarian is awake, sewing with a light near the window, her hand making quick work. She lifts her head. You give her the sign for you first. She shakes her head and makes the sign for later again, and then the small finger sign that means copper Saturday. You nod and point at the sky. The sky is the enemy of everyone in this house. It does what it wants. Still, you will coax the copper. You will kneel under it with a ladle and listen. The key turns soft when you close the lavatorium. You set it in your belt and touch it once with your fingers. The stone of the cloister is a cool best friend. You put your palm to it. It accepts you like a simple bowl accepts water. You think of the rumor turned on its side and left to dry by a basin. You think of the towel tokens breathing in their pegs and the cellarer's notebook that loves to scold. You think of the float valve that rests when men do what they should. You think of your own mouth, empty of speech, happy to be allowed a job. If you would have banked the brazier earlier or sworn you could wait for warm, tell me later. I want to hear if your house would have opened the copper or kept the rule cold. Put it in the comments and where you are watching from. The bell will find us soon. The cloister walk returns you to the arch where you began. Your basket is light enough. Your shoulders are the weight of water that did not have to shout to do its work. The air in the garden is the kind that holds its own breath to hear an animal pass. You ease past the chapter house and smell the wax that sits under every decision. A moth tries the lamp you have blown out and finds it too honest to love. You pass the refectory door and touch the worn place where habits go to die and new ones begin. The night staircase to the dormitory has a shiny place where 100 heels have confessed. You climb without counting. You are the key holder, the towel tally, the lie ladle, the man who can open a grate without making the room a host to noise. You smell your own hands, and they smell of ash and metal and a little smoke. You go to your straw and look at the ceiling. The rule holds you like a light rope. Tomorrow you will fill the copper and stand with the infirmarian at the door as the boys bring jugs from the tap. Tomorrow you will check the float valve at Tierce and mark the fall and show the cellarer your numbers like a priest showing a child his first letters. Tomorrow you will look at the slate under the towels and decide whether one name can be erased into obedience. The bell shakes the sky on its chain. Matins will open the book of the day. You turn on your side and put your hands under your cheek. Your fingers have lie in the small lines. It will not hurt you. You smile at the thought of the guest's face when he learns that men who keep silence also keep soap in their hands and tokens on their pegs. You sleep with both keys under the edge of your mat and the sound of the conduit in your ear, like a thin river that likes its bed. HYGIENE breathes whether you want it to or not. Before prime, the clapper raps twice and hands appear at the lavatorium in a quiet little tide, sleeves rolled, faces blank with sleep. You are already there, keys at your belt, basket against your ribs, the towel book open on the bench like a small courtroom. You set today's sequence with a finger that knows where to land. Refectory hands first. Reredorer sand filled and pegged. Infirmary water lifted on boys' shoulders by Tierce. Saturday warm water tags set aside in their own stack. A yellow sunrise you are not allowed to promise early. If you like watching rules turn into movement without anyone bragging, stay with me. Drop a comment later about whether your house would have opened the warming room for a cannon, because we are about to be tested. The lavatorium wakes as it always does, with hand signs flitting like sparrows in the half-light. Soap, a fist that turns. Towel, a pull across the forearm. You first, a small open palm. The spouts gloss the stone with their thin talk. You knot-colored tags on the pegs with split reed, white for refectory clean, yellow for Saturday warm water, blue for infirmary use. You move the towel tokens into place, one token for each towel that leaves the cupboard, a leash of bone and habit. In the ledger you choose your verbs with a miser's caution, aired for what breathed all night on pegs, scoured for the towels that saw ash and sand, boiled for the linen that went to the trough by the stream, set by for the pieces that can serve again without shaming anyone. The peal for refectory lineup taps the air. A small eddy of brothers changes direction. They pass in single file under the slit of sky, each raising the flat hand for wash as the canter requires. You prime the taps with the smallest lift of fingers. Soap today is tallow and ash, plain as conscience, poured into 2 shallow bowls you keep under linen to hold the smell. Pumice stones sit in a neat pair on a folded cloth for feet that need the old courtesy. You pass a stone to an ancient hand with a nod, and the sign for you first, then lean to wipe the lip of a spout with the end of a towel because neatness is a kind of respect here. The towel book sits open by your elbow with the day's count fresh, your lines straight as a psalm, when a sleeve bumps the bench and your ink tips its little C into tomorrow. It sprawls across the column that marks Saturday warm, a black insistence in a place that should hold order. You pin the page with your palm and breathe through your nose. The cellarer's pencil scratches behind you as he counts his loaves. He does not look over because he knows you are the sort who will not let a blot become a policy. You lay a scrap of cloth over the puddle and press until the shine goes. Underneath, 3 names blur. You will remember them long enough to fix them when nobody is watching. You are very good at memory when it tastes like vinegar and linen. 2 brothers swap pegs by mistake when the refectory line surges. They don't mean mischief, they mean to be fed. One takes a towel that belongs to infirmary blue and walks away with the easy stride of a man who knows rules will forgive him. The other, who needs a white refectory clean towel, stares at his hands as if they failed him. You make the sign for stop with the edge of your hand and step into the space between them like a staff no one can see. You strip the blue tag, knot a white in its place, slide the token across, and nod to the infirmary boy who appears from nowhere to tap the blue shoulder and claim what belongs to him. No sound, no scolding. The choreography saves everyone a penance. A friar slides along the wall with a face designed to look innocent in candlelight. He palms you a sealed chit with an archdeacon's smear on it the color of ripe plums. From the archdeacon, he mouths without breath. You are not allowed to speak, and yet you manage 3 sentences with a look. I am not a door. It is not Saturday. That seal is tired. He lifts his shoulders like a pocket trying to shrug and goes away to find someone else to deceive. You slip the chit under the towel book to rest under your palm until the urge to peek evaporates. Later you will add it to the small drawer where forged, open-by-order slips die of neglect. The visitor canon waits for his error to be vindicated. The joke someone muttered in the guest hall last night has turned into a request this morning. "Where is the bathhouse?" he said. A sparkle in the eye of a man who likes a story better than a rule. The cantor's mouth turned thin enough to slice bread. "Moderation, not filth," he hissed, and then made the sign for show him because silence cannot risk a second wrong story. You must walk the canon through the choreography without breaking enclosure, without breaking rule, without breaking the piece that keeps water where it belongs. You line the canon up like a novice. You make the sign for follow. He raises his brows and then, because he is not stupid, imitates your hand. You take him to the lavatorium so he can see a thing that looks like a bath and is not one. He sees the bronze spouts fed by the conduit and the stone basins rubbed smooth by a century of hands. He sees men wash before refectory, because that is the rule of the tap. He sees tokens and pegs and a book that keeps linen honest. You point to the small notice pinned above the cupboard in the cellarer's square hand. Wash before refectory, hold water, wipe the lip, return the towel with token. He reads aloud because some men do not feel they have learned anything unless their own voice is in the room. You incline your head and show him the sign for you first, and he almost laughs and then almost bows and then does neither. He gestures toward the warming room with the tilt of a head the way men tip coins. You nearly hear his word without him breaking the rule. Bath, you shake your head. Enclosure. He has read enough to know that word too. He points to the copper shadow through the arch. You cross your arms over your chest for no. The rule hurts nobody as long as it is obeyed. He considers arguing and then sees the prior at the far end of the walk and abandons it. He will try again later with a man who likes words. You are safe for now. Tierce is a drum in your bones. Not yet, nearly. The cistern will want to be refilled before you pull the warm water tags for Saturday and count them with the blue infirmary markers. You glance up at the slit of sky and see the kind of gray that suggests someone has laid a stone across the sun. You check the conduit flow with your fingers and then your ear. It hums steady. You do not need the float valve today, not yet. You mark the line in the cistern room and chalk the fall on the slate. The cellarer will pretend to harumph and then praise you by not saying anything at all. In the laundry yard, 2 laywomen haul sheets at the trough by the stream, forearms glossy, faces patient as chalk. You walk the path with your basket and nod to the one with the scar over her eyebrow. She flicks her eyes toward the warming room with the kind of glance that invents trouble. A lay servant has begun quietly selling an extra warm basin to gentry who bring coin and entitlement. You know because the linen comes back with a smell of brass polish, and because the towels go missing in pairs on the same afternoon. You have seen his small chest under the guest stair where he counts his sins. You make a knot in your mind to catch him later with the cellarer 2 steps behind you like a conscience. Mid-morning, A lamp crawls across the floor near the towel cupboard, turning the flag into a theater. A novice has marched off with the last white towel in his enthusiasm. You reassign towels in the dark, your fingers reading tags without asking eyes to help. The lamp crawls closer and you finish the knot with a tug, then raise your hand in the sign that means you first to the man holding the light. He steps back as if told. You put a towel in the right hands and move the token 2 pegs. Nobody says the word you could ruin this with. They move because you asked without asking. The canon returns at the wrong moment with an expression that has not matured into apology. He has acquired a thin excuse. The archdeacon requires an inspection. He produces the sealed chit you put under the towel book an hour ago. You raise your brows. He has another. This one smells like beeswax and vanity. The cantor appears behind him like a hedge and hisses moderation, not filth, in a voice that could split a hair without harming it. The prior's face becomes a door that locks without a key. He nods to you once, a meaning you have learned to read. Walk him to the threshold, not beyond. Show him the rules, not the copper. You walk the canon along the cloister side of the warming room without letting him enter. You point at the little shelf where you keep the knob of pumice for feet. You point at the Saturday tags. Yellow sunrises you will hang on pegs tomorrow, and you hold 3 up so he can see that there is a ration, that the rule limits heat the way it limits wine. He tries to step in. You tilt the key in the lock without letting it turn, a gesture that says, "This is how far we go." He reads the grammar. His mouth makes a line a confessor would recognize. He will preach moderation with a tone that forgives the joke he told himself last night. He will say monks wash like gentlemen and never say bath. It is not perfect. It is better than the myth you found on his tongue. Tears creeps nearer. You refill the cistern, carry sand to the reredorer stalls, top the jars so the night path will not fail the timid. You pour lye into the tubs for the laundry, scald, stir, twist, rinse. You hang the blue tags for infirmary and watch 2 boys' shoulder jugs that look like penances against their ribs. You add a knob of rosemary to the smallest bowl, because the infirmarian believes in kindness that does not cost doctrine. She will send a thin thanks later in the way she pours. At the lavatorium, a small scene plays in silence and means more than words. A brother holds his palm out for hot and you pinch the air and nod, then point to the brazier. Your banked coals glow like an idea you kept to yourself. You pour a dipper of warm into the basin and he cleans his hands with the concentration of a scribe. He touches his eyes with the tips of 2 fingers and then wipes the lip of the spout. A visitor sees this and forgets his joke before it leaves his mouth. A lay servant tries his luck. He approaches with a pilgrim of means and the kind of smile that buys mischief. He raises his brows toward the warming room and shows 2 fingers and a coin. You take the coin and give him the sign for no, then put the coin on the bench and lay a towel over it. The cellarer's shadow falls across the stone. He has the look of a man about to add a line to a notebook called Losses that is not about towels. The lay servant discovers humility. It does not fit him, and that is temporarily beautiful. The secret slate behind the towel shelf sits where you left it. 3 names written small. The honeyed corruption every house allows itself to keep breathing. You erase 1. 2 remain. You will not be able to explain it to yourself later. You will call it moderation and hope a better word feels like it belongs to you someday. The canon intercepts you near the lavatorium with his sermon already written in his cheek. He draws the sign for soap clumsily and then the one for wash, and for a foolish instant you love him, because learning our language is sometimes the only apology people are capable of. He points up. The sky is a simple gray that makes everyone behave. It will change by sext. He will be gone by none. He will take your quiet rules out into the loud world and mangle them into something almost true. That is fine. You have towels to count. The peal for refectory calls, and the line moves. You stand with your basket tucked into your ribs and nod at hands that have learned soap, and at hands that forget. You flick a finger toward the sand jar for a man who tries to go from the reredorer to choir without stopping. He blushes and shows you his palm without resentment. This is the kind of power you can stand to have. At the stream, towels go under and come out cleaner than judgments. Laundry troughs slap linen against boards with a sound like applause happening underwater. You see the stain a pumice stone will solve and make a note. Blue for infirmary, boiled, set by. The ledger takes the verbs like a man takes bread. You write them carefully because people's dignity sometimes lives in whether you chose aired or scoured. Late morning, before Tierce snaps the morning in half, you climb to the cistern loft and mark the fall. The float valve sits obedient as a trained bird. You chalk your number. The cellarer taps the slate with his knuckle later and says nothing. That is how he loves you. The prior passes your bench and tilts his head exactly the degree he reserves for work done properly without noise. That is how he keeps you. A boy scuffs up to you with a bruise blooming on his shin. He raises his eyes like a request. You dip a cloth in the smallest bowl and add a breath of vinegar. You hold it out. He presses cloth to limb and makes the face of men who have discovered that stinging now prevents stinking later. The infirmarian sees you and nods. She will lie about this favor if someone accuses you of generosity. You will lie about her lie. The rule survives on such minor treasons. By Tierce, the canon is gone, his sermon leashed, his joke trimmed of its cruelty. The towel book has dried and you have rewritten the 3 names you memorized under the blot. The ledger holds its verbs, the pegs wear their colors. The warming room's key is cool against your hip. The copper for Saturday sleeps behind its low door like a reason you can trust. The lay servant has found other work to do. The cellarer's losses for today will be fewer by 1. You stand at the lavatorium and watch the last hands wash before the midday bell. The sign for move flickers as men make space without pride. The hand for you first becomes a habit someone will never notice he learned. A novice makes the sign for towel in a neat little flourish because he likes the feeling of competence. A visitor copies him badly, and no one laughs. You wipe a spout lip for the 5th time for no reason, except that it is what makes you like yourself. If you were here, would you have let the canon into the warming room and risked enclosure for a better story? Or refused and risked hearing monks never wash from a safe pulpit tomorrow? Tell me in the comments, threshold only or show the copper. Tell me where you're watching from. We will compare answers while the tokens breathe on their pegs and the conduit hums a tune that never needs a choir. The bell for Tierce takes a bite out of the sky. You finish your list as the first syllables of the office climb the stone. The rule of the tap holds the morning together, the same way a string holds a parcel. You knot your colored tags where they should be. You close the towel book and tuck the archdeacon's chit deeper into the drawer where such things go to be forgotten without fanfare. You lift your basket. You step into the cloisters, cool, and hear the form of quiet justice that keeps a monastery clean. It sounds like water not wasted, linen not stolen, soap set by when no one is looking, hands telling the truth about what they have touched. Frost bit the conduit in the night, and the wall told you so before the float valve did. The stone had a kind of ache in it that made your palm remember winter in your bones. When you pressed your ear to the plank of the chamber hatch, you heard not the cheerful hiss that means pressure speaking under its breath, but a clumsy gulp, a pause, a sulky trickle learning the shape of disappointment. You lifted the hatch and the smell of cold metal came up like a prayer from a church you don't often visit. The float sat lower than it should. The waterline numbered on the plaster with the cellarer's neat years of finger marks now sulking under the line that says, "We are well." You touched the seam where the feeder turns to make the wall, and your finger came away with a film like tears. A leak, not a gush, not yet. Not the humiliating fountain that would announce itself to the whole cloister, just the kind of slow injury Frost likes to perform, in the curve, where Lead thinks it is a thought no winter can correct. You set your basket on the bench, opened the small chest with the lead patch kit, and laid out the things that lied when they promised to be ordinary. Strip of thin lead, pot of goose fat wrapped in old linen, beeswax warmed under your arm to obedience, dull knife with its edge more faithful than cleverness. The rule does not stop being the rule because a pipe sulks. Before prime, the lavatorium must talk, the rarid order sand must stand ready, the infirmary must not be surprised by the day. You cut a little square of lead, warmed it against your own wrist until it stopped complaining about manners, and called for the mason with your hands, because your mouth is not allowed to work here. The boy who runs for people with tools saw your small, open palm over the hatch and went with the speed of a man who had once slipped near the night stairs and does not wish to know that feeling again. While he was gone, you pressed a pad of wax against the seam and laid the warm lead square over it, then the goose fat under the heel of your hand for a seal. It held in the way a promise holds when it likes you. The mason came at a trot and set his tools on the bench with the dignity of a man who worships at a bench. He tapped the pipe with a knuckle as if taking a pulse, squinted at the place where your warm square sat, and used the tip of his knife to tidy your work. "You saw it early," he said under his breath, "and because the sacrist was not near the knight's stairs and the prior was not near the hatch and God already knew his words, you let your mouth be the silence and your shoulders accept the praise." He sat on the bench and thumbed wax, cut lead, triaged the crack with the concentration of a monk facing a heavy word, and left you with a strip of his calmer. Half a peal from the gate cut a rising murmur in the guest hall. A herald's trumpet does this even when it intends to announce nothing but the hour someone else told it to announce. The sound lays a hand over rumor and wagers it can keep it seated. But inside the guest hall, a merchant had been working his canard since dawn, feeding it coin and resentment until it fattened itself into a sermon you could smell. "Monks stink like penance," he said, with the confidence of a man who sells his certainty in measures. "He has not yet learned the hand sign for you first." The prior found you fast enough that it seemed he had been waiting in the shadow of the hatch. He raised 2 fingers and drew them down like water being asked to be obedient. "Demonstration," the sign said without breaking a vowel. "Show, not tell." His mouth laid the rest. Hallway basins charged. Infirmary wash made ready. Saturday copper fired early. The sacrist's brow supplied the footnote. No clatter near the night stairs. You bowed with your hand to your breast and said yes with your spine. A leak means a rota rewritten with your heel. You sent the infirmary boys for the blue tag towels, boiled, scoured, set by, and set one by one into your basket with the tenderness people, who do not speak, often reveal without knowing it. You primed the hallway basins along the passage that tastes like wax and habit, lifting stopcocks, quarter turn, and smoothing lye paste with the pad of your thumb until bronze decided to shine. You took the copper lid in the warming room, like it was a bell you were not allowed to ring, leaned it quiet against the wall, and set kindling in its square in the way you rehearse when you don't trust your thoughts. Coals from the ember jar woke like old dogs who knew their name. You added a dipper of water, and the little cough the copper gives when it is pleased whispered itself to the ceiling. The sacrist appeared in the doorway, with the soft shoulders of a man who knows how to frighten people without using his hands. He made a small chop in the air, move, and then a pinch, hot, and then the long palm down that means without stirring night. You bowed again. He met you where the night stairs spill into the passage, and set his palm on the stone to show you the way sound can travel like scandal if you let it. You nodded like you could tie bells to your own wrists and still make no music. Your choice arrived with your own feet, which basin gets the first ladle of warm. Refectory hands, cleaner, lined like a lyric along the cloister, the infirmary wash, needier, waited behind a door that begins to understand how to be a mercy before breakfast. Send hot to the infirmary and watch the refectory line starve its patience. Divert to refectory and the infirmarian's eyes would write your name in the varnish of your day. You set your jaw and let the rule be a kind of triage. Hands that eat first to keep the house in step, wounds next so the day does not become a report, then faces that will be seen and therefore teach by looking like the rule does not lie. You poured the first ladle into a basin that would see 20 hands, and then walked to the infirmary with water cradled under a damp cloth, a small son you were not allowed to show the world. Prior's peace within the cloister, the cellarer hissed behind the guest screen when the merchant's volume tried to make himself a cathedral. The cellarer's hiss is an instrument, it has a key of its own. He looked for you with the eyebrows of a man who keeps numbers and loses arguments. You let him find you with your motion, not your face. He mouthed move, and you were, already, a study of obeying. A novice collapsed at the second spout because winter lives under the stones even when the sky pretends it does not. You had one hand on a basin and the other on the copper ladle, and somehow had 2 more hands when they were required. You caught him with the open palm that keeps heads from learning to think in new directions, eased him to the bench, and lifted his wrist to count the shape of his pulse. 12 slow, and then a rabbit under a hawk shadow, then 12 slow again. The infirmarian appeared in the corner of your eye, and you felt yourself become the kind of quiet that medicine uses to make its way, placing the ladle in her fingers as if you and she had practiced it in a dream you both had. In the hallway, basins swallowed adjectives and returned men to nouns. This, water, this, ash, this, towel, this, hand. The merchant stood with his roomer fumbling for its cloak, and watched your fingers lay out ash lye, set scouring sand, warm a mouthful of water without spectacle. He expected arguments. He got verbs. He is not as interested in verbs. He watched you set a pinch of sand on the palm of a boy who believed in the sound grit makes, and watched that boy rub his own skin clean of the day before, and the merchant's mouth lost its adjectives for a moment, which is the first line of any prayer worth hearing. The wise woman came through the arch with a sprig of rosemary cupped in her hand the way some men carry coins. She slipped it to you without anyone's eyes finding the exchange, her palm meeting yours like the trick that never betrays. To keep hands sweet, her lips said without saying. You pinched a leaf into the smallest bowl, and the infirmary smelt like sense instead of piety for an hour. An apothecary passing through the court lifted his voice in the direction of a paying ear, and swore lye bleaches the soul as well as sleeves. A priest, who must oppose phrases like that even when he is not opposed to soap, warned a novice about talismans sewn into towel hems. You wrote device in your notebook in the small margin where you write words that stop you from being unkind with your eyes. The mason sat on your bench and triaged the crack like it was his uncle, waxing and wrapping lead with a patience you borrowed. He bound the place a little higher up too, out of respect for Frost's talent for finding friends. Sureties, he said, half to the pipe and half to the empty air, as if a word from another house could be encouraged to serve here. You nodded because he had built a promise inside a wall, and you respected the ambition. A guest at the far basin would have found luxury if he had been allowed to see a brazier without the rule standing between them. You held the copper ladle under the cloth every time you crossed a line of sight, and understood, again, why the prior says in this house, "We do not convince with heat, only with warmth." You poured small, as if pouring more would say the wrong sentence about what's allowed. The refector's bell cut the hush like a ribbon requires. The sound does a thing that makes men remember to flatten their hand for wash and then go where they promised to be. The line moved as it always does when people trust the spouts to keep their tiny language. Outside, someone's cartwheel squealed a complaint at the wet flagstones. Men dragged quicklime across the slippery places with the same steady rhythm with which other men say the prayers they believe most. The prior passed near the night stairs without his feet, that is how it seemed, and the sacrist's hand flattened a sound before it was born. The merchant at the guest screen leaned to see if he could catch a glimpse of contraband mercy and caught instead the angle of an elbow, the tilt of a head, the token held between two fingers that says towels return, as promised, in a house that believes promises are a civic trade more than a personal virtue. His rumor began to rot under the heat of seeing. You went from conduit to lavatorium to infirmary and back like this place had wound a spring under your ribs. You carried water as if it could tell on you if it slopped. You knew the trick of tucking the ladle into the crook of your elbow while your fingers did other work. You had a hole in your right sleeve you promised yourself you would mend at none. You had the smell of rosemary fighting with the soldiering of lead at the back of your throat and found them more married than you are comfortable admitting. The cellarer hissed move again at the wrong time and for the right reason. A visiting canon who had learned from yesterday's play wanted to stand where people wash when people who wash are doing the washing. You gave the sign for threshold only, and he obeyed because yesterday you taught him how to like himself while obeying you, and he is not ready to stop liking himself. The cantor's mouth is still the thin blade it was born to be. Moderation, not filth, he whispered near a bench, and you watched the sentence, more than the content, clean a path for sense. Rumor breeds in corners. The lay servant with the bright idea to rent out an extra warm basin crept up the warming room steps with the entitlement that waits for men in cellars. You were already there because you decided yesterday that your supervision might be required, and you prefer to have already arrived urgently. He showed 2 fingers and a coin, the coin small because he enjoys the arithmetic more than the mercy. You laid a damp cloth over the brazier, and then a towel over the coin, and then rested the copper ladle across both, a small arrangement called "Not Tonight." The cellarer's shadow filled the doorway with the smell of ledgers. The lay servant developed a sudden respect for cold water, the same one that appears in men's theology when hot goes expensive. The cellarer will find a loss to write about and hope it will teach him not to like certain numbers. The merchant's voice decayed by sext. He needed verbs and you did not give him any. He wanted exception and you laid before him a choreography made of many men doing a small thing properly, a film on the day's milk that you skim even when no one asks you to. He had wanted to see a bath. He saw a room that dissolves into sentences like these: aired, scoured, boiled, set by. He has to sell adjectives, you sell verbs. The market appoints him as a man who speaks loudly, the house appointed you a man who pushes quietly. You won as far as winning goes in a place with no applause. When the refectory emptied its clatter into spoon and then into mouth, you filled the hallway basins again and let thin ropes of water rewrite what hands had just told them. The infirmary asked you with a glance for one more small son, and you gave it, ladle under cloth, breath under breath, noise under the weight of the sacrist's palm on the stone near the stairs. Prior's peace within the cloister, you mouthed into your shoulder when your shoulder had to pass a loud man. Your shoulder agreed to speak the sentence, and the floor agreed to believe it. A novice came with a towel that had forgotten it is not a cape. You took it from his shoulder with a smile in your wrist, and moved the token back to its peg with a neatness that taught a lesson without drawing blood. He blushed the kind of blush boys blush when they plan to brag later about not being scolded. Rubbed a spout lip with your thumb where his silliness had kissed it and the bronze remembered its manners. In the conduit room the patch held, the float rose a finger and a half since prime, the chalk line on the plaster grew less insulted by the day. The mason tucked your kit back into the chest and wiped his knife on the edge of his apron like he loved it too much to be cruel. If it holds through next frost, he said, it might think itself accustomed. You nodded the kind of nod you reserve for load-bearing sentences. By none, the copper in the warming room had done enough work to make other people's work easier. You set the lid on it with the reverence men use for lids in houses made of conversations. You banked the coals with a caution that felt like belief. The infirmarian came to the door with the eyes of someone who keeps stitches in a place she can reach without hands. You made the sign for finished for now, and she showed you the palm that means well done in the lexicon. Nobody is written down, and everyone knows. The merchant, now bored with saying monks smell like penance because men who wash have pressed his nose into better uses, found a new object and left, taking his trumpet of vowels into a street that would sell it a better echo. The refectorer's bell fell over the hush and picked it up with the round sleeves of its sound. The cellarer counted something and decided to let it pass. The sacrist let his hand off the wall, and the wall kept the silence by itself for 3 steps. The prior walked by with air where his eyebrows usually keep their weapons, and you considered this your pay. You wrote device again beside rosemary. You drew a small crosshatch beside the line that says lie grown colder by sext, stoked by care, applied in moderation. You wrote quicklime in the margin where you record what saved ankles when frost performed its sermon on the flags. You wrote sureties next to patch with a neatness you learned from the cellarer and a debt you owe the mason. You wrote aired, scoured, boiled, set by in your towel book with the private pleasure of men who like verbs and cannot defend the liking to people who prefer adjectives. When you walked the long passage where the night stairs make themselves known by their modest squeak, your hand found the groove at hip height where knuckles give courage to the dark. The groove's patience felt like religion without the trouble. You marked the sand jar with your foot and thought of the day when it had first been placed there, and the person who had had the sense to refill it without being asked, and the small community traditions that are policy at a scale no chapter ever writes down. If you're still with me, if the leak made you think of something you've held together with thumb and luck in your own house, tell me whether you sent the first warm bowl to refectory or infirmary. Hands or wounds, right? Write it below and where you're watching from. We'll argue with no one listening but the lead, the rosemary, and the pipe that learned customs from your patch. Sext passed, none taught the sky a different grammar. Vespers promised to change everyone into readers of light. The pipe held. The rumor did not. The basins looked like they always look, hungry and full at once. The copper slept under its lid, like a creature that knows it will be asked again. The tokens at the pegs breathed as though wood were lung. You were tired the way a tap is tired, which is to say, ready to keep doing the thing that keeps the house a house. When the last light made the bronze noses an idea of stars, you passed your hand over them as you count children who have not done wrong and plan not to. Your hands smelt of ash lye and warmed metal, and the green that hides in rosemary. You held it near your face because all good work benefits from the attention of its owner. Then you locked the warming room, returned the mason's knife to his bench, tucked the towel book under your arm, and walked into a night that had not learned your name and did not need to. The conduit hummed a thin lullaby behind the wall, and you made a note to visit it after Compline as if visiting pipes were visiting family, which, in a monastery that keeps its peace with water and verbs, it is. Torches gutter the way torches do when a night wants to be longer than it is. The gate bars with a sound you feel in your elbows. Word has walked out of the guest court and found a crowd that likes its verbs cheap. Townsmen lean on their own opinions and jeer about monthly baths, the sort of phrase that spends well and costs nothing. In here, the chapter house sweats wax. The prior sits with his knuckles in a book, and the beadle stands with a stick that would like to be a metronome. The chapter converts mockery into policy, because that is what chapter is for, to persuade the world that decisions happen when men are watching. Public guidance, the prior says, and the sacrist writes it in air with 2 fingers. Quiet passage to and from the lavatorium. Fines, and the cellarer coughs the word alms because he likes economy to sound holy, for towel losses. Saturday warm water ration affirmed on paper so it can defend itself. On paper, orders to air the rarid order. On paper is a place this house understands too well. The beadle pushes the draft under your hand with the flat of his stick. Copy fair, copy fast, copy flawless. The bench smells like rosemary. The infirmarian has been steaming over vinegar in the infirmary. It has crept down the passage and reminded the chapter house it is a place with bodies in it. You square the sheet and write the lines in a hand that knows how to be obeyed by people who will not remember your name when they recite the rules you gave them. Quiet passage, to and from the lavatorium, you write, the words, walking like brothers who do not like each other and agree to keep it between them. Towel immersements to be tallied and bound in twine like fish a market approves of. Saturday warm water ration as printed and pinned on the board, tokens to be issued at prime. Air the rarid order by the clock, on paper, and then, when paper has been asked to breathe, in fact. You write the exceptions in the small script the prior favors. Save calamity, save illness, save those under obedience to the infirmary. The beadle's cough leans into the worst line, levy for towel losses to be collected at the chest, and your pen makes the dot at the top of the I bigger than it needs to be. A flare blooms near the laundry sheds before your sand has found the ink. Orange licks the seam where wool remembers how to be sheep. You and 2 boys pass buckets like catechism. Wet wool hisses on embered planks. The sound is a hymn nobody claims. The line outside the gate holds its breath at the wrong angle and nearly chokes itself. Someone with more sense than love drags a cartwheel back from the flame, and its squeal carves itself into your jaw. The last bucket surrenders the smoke with a sulk. The boys grin for the right reason, because something that wanted to disobey decided not to. Back on the plank, the draft waits, a patient animal that has decided to call you its name. Your hands forget to shake. You sand the lines, and the grit takes wetness into a mat you trust. The beadle points to the margin where a cousin's friend has already had the courage to slide a slip. Keep this quiet, the note purrs, in a hand that did not practice scruples. You lay the slip under your palm and let your bone answer for you. Omit it forever. Near your elbow, a coin rings and refuses to be pretty. The dead washerwoman's sister has come in from the laundry yard with a face made of weather and trouble. She lays her only round on your plank like a limb she cannot keep. 5 words different, she says. Save the infirm from cold water. She does not beg. She orders on behalf of people who will not raise their voices. She is proper to a fault, and still she does this. You lift your eyes. The prior is watching nothing with the attention of a man who has seen far too much. The beadle's cough returns for drama. You hold your pen above the place where exceptions live, and you choose to owe her later if you cannot pay now. You write, infirmary may draw warm outside Saturday on physician's order. It is not exactly permission. It is not exactly refusal, it is a string you can pull when a fever is clever and the rule is not. Under the guest house, a trap opens with a humility it does not feel. Men descend into the cellaret with small bags that jingle like nerves. Extra Saturday basins, someone says, with the honesty of a man who has fully resigned himself to specific sins. They count bribes in the dark, and the arched ceiling devoutly returns no echo. The cellarer is 2 rooms away, pretending not to be a spy. You mark the place in your mind with the same knot you put behind your knee when walking a hill you wish to remember later. Here is where we will stand when we say it out loud. The prior asks for recognizances with awkward crosses from those who have taken towel and not brought towel back. The gate porter brings in a bench full of men with humility printed on their faces. They sign with an X, as if they suspect the letter is mocking them. The cellarer binds their immersements with twine that makes the little noise you can always hear in this house when a decision is being tied to a person. Key rings clack like teeth on the table, where the beadle keeps the people who need persuading near his elbow. He prefers metal that listens. Outside, the townsmen shout about baths they haven't seen. Inside, you write the line about quiet passage in a hand that climbs the page like a vine and blossoms into a notice that can be hammered into a board without horror. The beadle wants it posted before the gate learns a riot. The cantor wants the sentence which mentions enclosure to be written as a man who values the sound of it might say it. The sacrist wants you to take care with the verb for airing the reredotor. The cellarer wants his alms refunded in souls. The infirmarian wants heat without asking, as if guilt has fingers. You are allowed to want nothing but your pen behaving like honor. You break the want with a litany of verbs, aired, scoured, boiled, set by. It calms you each time. You step outside with the notice in one hand and the hammer in the other. The drum roll under the posted board has already invented itself. The townsmen learn to hush the way towns do when a new rule arrives and claims to have patches on its elbows. You nail the notice under the eaves. Quiet passage to and from the lavatorium, it says. No gawking, no jeering, no sale of basins. Saturday tokens count. Towel losses cost. Air will be allowed where the body requires, in that order. The gate breathes like a man in trouble who saw a door open. The astrologer drifts along the wall with the air of someone who wishes the sky were a hoard he could inventory. Lucky hour, he says when the wind drops, then shoves the lucky hour forward with his thumb as clouds wander into a shape that can only be described as later. You do not pay him. You make a mark in the rubble near the trap. You are learning what is owed to whom. The beadle reads the policy aloud to an audience of key rings. His cough punctuates somehow the exact wrong words. Fines become a kind of cough. Ration becomes a kind of cough. Air becomes a cough without apology. You put the notice up in the cloister too, where men with good hands and poor eyes will learn it by touch. You rub the edge with your thumb so it doesn't cut. A visiting canon appears with his own idea of chapter, and the sacrist pulls the word enclosure out of the air like a ribbon. You nod to the canon with the face that says, threshold only. He glares at your notice and discovers it says what his better self would have said had he been invited to write it. His lip bows to the paper with a curl that might be show. You can live with show. It makes fewer stains than sincerity. The contested name on your Saturday list sits where you pushed it earlier, a little rich pilgrim who learned yesterday that rules can be rented if one knows the stairs. The lay servant put him there, and the cousin's steward sent the slip that used the old line. Open by order. Your margin now says omit. Your list says not this time. The infirmary list sits below it with the blue tags in your neat line. You pick up the contested name and turn it over like bread that has not risen. You put it down again under the sheet where the cellarer will count it as lost and be correct. Under the guest hall, the cellaret's mouth resumes counting. You draw 3 breaths like rope and decide to tie all of them. You kneel at the board outside the guest court and write in small, neat letters everyone will read and no one can reasonably fear. No paid basins. Saturday tokens only. The cousin's steward passes and sees your hand. He smiles like a felted glove and taps the corner of the board with a knuckle that understands coin. He would add a line that reads, except as required. He does not own a pen. Back in the chapter house, the prior signs the line about airing the reredotor with the calm of a man who believes windows possess consciences. The infirmarian sister's coin sits under your hand where the ink dried and changed its age. The beetle makes a cough that asks without wanting to know. You sweep the coin into the dish for alms and write the small exception that will allow heat to find wounds without burning the rule. You hated how that sentence fought you. You like what it will do. The townsmen at the gate find a new volume, the jeer turned towards someone else's wall. The porter's keyhole sees it all and reports nothing. The cart that squealed earlier returns as a groan. The rosemary vinegar steam slips along the ground like a conscience and lingers under the warming room door. If anyone smells it out there, they will call it luxury. In here, it is just what mercy costs. A lay servant, not the same, thinks himself brave and holds up 2 fingers at you in the warming room, coin in the palm like proof of citizenship. You show him the notice you wrote 5 minutes ago and point to the words with the patience of a school. He bares his teeth the way boys do when they discover they will not be asked to be generous. You lay a towel over his coin. The cellarer's shadow arrives. The lay servant learns to like cold. You post the ration for Saturday warm water with the yellow tokens pinned in a row like crooked sunrises. You hold a blue tag besides it in your other hand for the infirmary, and the infirmarian, who appears the way kindness does, nods at the exact right second for your nerves. You choose aired instead of scoured for one towel because the dignity of the brother who used it would prefer it. You choose boiled for another because life is short and germs are patient even if the rule has not learned that word yet. Your own name floats for a moment, where the chapter keeps its stone for to be silenced. The visiting canon's lip twitches when he reads your notice. The cousin's steward applies carelessness like ointment when he sees what you did to his exception. The townsmen decide to remember you as the man who nailed a sentence dry in rain. If it goes wrong later, that stone remembers names. The prior's eyebrows do a thing that means be careful where you stand. You stand where a key ring's teeth can find you and count that as a seat. The line outside the lavatorium forms at vespers as it always does when the day begins to forgive itself. The sign for wash sharpens men's faces into something you could almost call hope. You hold your basket at your ribs and nod to hands that have learned lie's humbler uses. A boy tries to run between reredorer and choir without the sand jar. You flick a finger in the sign he now knows belongs to him. He blushes the kind of red that grows out of respect. He will carry his own towel back tonight without parading it. Night thickens. The chapter house empties of policy and fills with wax again. The notice skates into opinions like a good blade. The string around the towel immersements bites mistakes into a tidy sheaf. Recognizances sleep under the cellarer's hand. The infirmarian walks with the posture of a woman who will always receive 2 more patients than she expected, and never be surprised. The beetle sets his stick against the wall like a truce. The sacrist breathes against the stone near the night stairs and decides he can trust the wall to do the work without his palm. The prior walks past your shoulder and says nothing with a quality of silence that writes 2 words in your back, I saw. You carry your pen to the guest hall and lay it on the bench like a weapon men forgot to sharpen. The trapdoor under the guest hall closes on a number that will become a story when you choose to tell it. Not tonight. Tonight you file the paper exceptions where keys will find them again, not where coins can learn them. You choose not to erase your name off the warm water list of men who will be blamed when someone counts wrong. You choose to leave the contested pilgrim in the corner where envy cannot see him and kindness cannot make a fool of itself. You lock the warming room and test the hinge with a finger that has learned the grammar of thresholds. If you were me, if a sister laid her only coin for save the infirm from cold water, if a steward pushed you a margin that said, keep this quiet, would you erase or obey, write omit or obey, and where you're watching from? We'll count our small treasons together and call them virtue, if that's what keeps the copper honest. Torches gutter. The gate shuts its opinion. The townsmen discover their voices belong to the weather. The notice under the eaves dries into a sentence someone else will read aloud tomorrow and possess as if they wrote it, which is fine. Rosemary's ghost drifts under the door and waits where bodies do the things Scripture does not talk about enough. The copper sleeps behind a door that has learned to forgive hinges. The tokens breathe where pegs do. The conduit hums. You breathe with it. You go to close the cistern lamp and see your own name scratched tiny where the beetle record's work done as ordered. You add another line because you are vain about verbs: aired, scoured, boiled, set by, posted, omitted. You leave out the one you will write tomorrow if you can bear it, leaked. Because that is when mercy becomes paper and true. That is when we say out loud under the guest hall eaves what has been counted in the dark. But that is part 5 feet's burden. Tonight you lie down with ash in your fingerprints and the remembered weight of a coin that asked you not to be clever, just to bend the line into a curve the rule can live with. Dawn fits the square back into its frame. Trumpets taste the air. Drums find the root note. The velvet-voiced reader climbs his crate with the good parchment in his hand. His Grace commends those who kept quiet order at the lavatorium and refectory. The words move without needing you. Basins gleam because you taught them how. Windows stand open because a bargain in ink said they must. The copper breathes a thin heat under its lid only because the rule allowed it and because you did not blink when the pen tried to lessen the sentence. You stand at the lip of the cloister with your basket against your ribs, and the keys a comfortable bruise at your hip. The merchant with the myth strolls past the guest gate free as air, his story polished down to moderation, his certainty intact. In town, the midwife's lintel wears a yellow tag instead of red, a knot you can feel in your own wrist. A widow folds to the cobbles at the corner where market noise starts, and 2 hands that do not belong to the same family lift her as if they always had the right. The reader turns the page and calls it grace. You carry paper and keep yourself from calling it a receipt. This hour is the snowfall of duplicates that settles dust without cleaning blood. One parchment to the prior, who signs the line that kept windows honest as if the word had been his all along. One to the infirmarian, who tucks it under the shelf with the rosemary and the vinegar where the house keeps its small, indecent mercies. One to the guild, who have decided to prefer rules that can be nailed to boards over rumors they cannot invoice. Your legs do the circle. Your hand does the verbs. Your mouth has no labor this morning. Your silence works for you. Over yesterday's shut-ups for towel loss, a new sheet is pinned, wide as a promise you will not have to make. Muster for the king's levy. Names begin to gather at the bottom edge, where the brave put ink under their own breaths, and where the hungry discover a new purchase on pride. You finally learn what all these rules bought, not glamour, obedience, not luxury, lanes that move, stomachs fed, wounds tended, not holiness, a harvest of men promised for later to a field you cannot see from here. You feel the heat of the copper at your back and understand that warmth sells loyalty at a price that looks like love. The steward peels out of a shadow like a rumor you have not had breakfast for. He has a livery badge in his palm, enamel winking like a tame star. Mark more wisely, he says, the pinpoint glinting up at your chest. His smile measures you, then measures the copper behind you, then measures the notice you nailed under the eaves last night. The guildmaster occupies the other side of your day with a nod and a sentence you could pack inside your cloak. Sanctuary, if needed, till the pest passes, he says. No badge, no smile, only a plank you could put under one foot while you plan where the other should land. The prior passes and gives you the look that makes other men report a miracle. I saw. Your kit reminds you who you are. Keys, cord, copper, silence. You feel the cord bite your fingers when you pull the yellow tokens to pin over the towel pegs for Saturday. You hear vinegar coins clink into ladles for the lean who refuse to call it alms. You walk past a last rosemary bundle smoldering to ash in the brazier and breathe in a ghost that has kept richer things alive than basil. Somewhere, a parchment gets marked misadventure for a slip at the wet flags. Someone who never learned to lift his robes properly stands corrected on paper by a pen that barely knows his name. You lay the roster for Saturday warm water, the yellow tags in 2 careful rows, 5 in one, 5 in the other, infirmary blue on its own little hook with a string that ties back through yesterday's exception. Men count quietly in front of it. The infirmarian reads it like weather and nods once. You note the names with the private act of kindness that this house dares you to perform only when no one can punish you for it. A shift here, a move there, a blank where pride was expecting to see itself. Your handwriting is where mercy lives, and you have been warned about that. You will be warned again. The choice that has been following you since none sits on your plank like a tame dog ready to become what you call it. The secret slate of spared Saturday basins, the side list of wards you aired against orders. Leak, burn, or file. You lay them both on the bench and recognize that each verb writes your future in a hand other people will learn to imitate. Burn is a story that protects today by starving tomorrow. The steward would approve. The guild would be fed ideas they cannot spend. Leak is a story that sacrifices your quiet to teach a town you do not trust as much as you wish you did. The notice under the eaves will handle that lesson better if it is allowed to live. File is the story this place is always told when it decides to survive without applause. You tuck the slate and the side list under the towel book, where the cellarer files his losses and the sacrist files his done. In the drawer that can be moved by a key, but not by a coin. You choose to let the proof exist, where a question with a seal will find it, and where a whisper with a grin will not. The steward watches your hands and thinks he has time. The guildmaster watches your shoulders and hopes for wisdom, not heroics. The prior watches nothing and writes gratitude into the space between your name and your work. Your name will not be spoken when the levy clerk calls for the men who must march. Your handwriting will be everywhere. Small, neat, primitive as scaffolding. What you own, you set in order. The keys sleep in the pocket that will not betray them. The cord is coiled and hung where speed can find it. The copper lid sits on its rim against the wall like a polite halo. Your silence rests where your tongue might. Warm, ready, obedient. When the reader names grace, you stand very still and let the word pass through you like somebody else's hunger. You think for a flicker of a moment of sleeping under sanctuary eaves while your name cools in the dark. You think of wearing a patron's livery and letting your handwriting change hands. You decide to stay where the tap knows your touch. Chests of fines groan into carts outside the gate and roll away with the scrape of taxes in a week, with no market. The porter watches them go and does not blink, a kind of loyalty unique to men with keys. A boy you like counts towel tokens on a peg with his lips and then remembers you are watching and pretends to do it with his fingers only. A visitor hesitates before the notice and then raises his hand for wash and laughs at himself softly. The infirmarian pushes a bowl at an elbow without looking up, and the elbow thanks her without turning. Small verbs keep their appointments. You deliver your last duplicate to the guild hall. The steward waits outside with a badge like a small argument. Mark more wisely, he says again, making the line a liturgy. You could live softer. You hand the roster to the guild clerk and watch him tie it to a peg with a piece of string that will not survive vespers. I am marking as wisely as I know, you say with your posture, and the steward learns that he has underestimated the eloquence of your bones. The guildmaster does not applaud, and that is how he loves you. The prior walks past, looks at you the way a man looks at a hinge he greased yesterday, and will not talk about. When the proclamation is read a second time near the cloister, you are in the doorway of the warming room, with the lid under your hand like a full stop. The trumpets taste less proud by then. The drums find the patience in their wood. The merchant with the myth is already telling a version suited to his next room. The midwife's yellow knot looks right where it is tied. The widow has stood. The roster holds. The copper keeps its temper. The windows behave because you and a pen reminded them in the night what manners feel like. You learn the thing you came here to learn. Monastery hygiene was not a rumor about luxury, not a joke about stink, not a tale fit for men with time to kill. It was justice as airflow and towel budget. Mercy as policy, not indulgence. Survival as a choreography of taps, tokens, and signs attended by a handful of people with thumbs and courage enough to move water without waking those who need to sleep. The hinge you have been lets the system swing again. No one notices, which is how a good hinge knows it is good. If this ending made sense to you, if you would leak, burn, or file, tell me which you would choose and where you're watching from. Tap subscribe and ring the bell if you need more of these small verbs holding up rude walls, and walk away knowing that somewhere a basin shines because someone who prefers silence chose to argue with metal instead of